everybody, and welcome. My name is Amy Bryant of Wild Child Counseling in Atlanta, Georgia, and I also have an international community on Facebook, Parenting Beyond Punishment. I am so happy that you're joining us today. I am here with Dr. Mona Delahooke. Dr. Delahooke is a licensed clinical psychologist with more than 30 years experience caring for children and their families. She's the author of the award-winning book, Beyond Behaviors, Using Brain Science and Compassion to Understand and Solve Children's Behavioral Challenges, and her newest book, Brain Body Parenting, which I am absolutely in love with, How to Stop Managing Behavior and Start Raising Joyful, Resilient Kids. Thank you so much, Dr. Mona Delahooke, for being here today. I am so happy to be chatting with you about your work and sharing this space with you.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. I've admired your work for years, and this is just a joy to be able to spend some time together talking about the stuff that means so much to us. So thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. So I'd love to start, and maybe you could share by talking about, what do you mean by brain body parenting?
Yeah, great question. It's been like I realized what I'm realizing more and more as the book has come out why I wrote it. And so I've had interviews and press interviews, and there was this interesting article in the New Yorker that talked about parenting styles. And right now there's a wave starting to crest that is kind of looking at parenting styles and comparing them. So the question that I'm getting asked a lot is, what type of parenting style is the best? Is it mindful parenting? Is it permissive parenting? Is it positive parenting? Is it gentle parenting? And is it conscious parenting? And what are the differences? So our journalists and I think our culture in general is confused. Like, is there a preferred parenting style? And what does the research say? So the reason that I wrote Brain Body Parenting, and the reason it's titled that, is that what I'm trying to say is the most important question to ask isn't what parenting style is the best, because that research has yet to be done. The most important question to ask is, how is this interaction with a child, with my child at this moment, how is it landing in that child and in me as a parent? And that is where we talk about nervous systems. That is where we talk about we're never just a brain. Everything is landing in our body and our brain at the same time. So brain body parenting is introducing this helicopter view, this, like, not helicopter parenting, but this view that's hovers above all parenting styles and looks at what builds resilience in humans. And we absolutely know from research what builds resilience and what degrades it. We know what can trigger trauma and what can buffer trauma. And that's the exciting news about, that was why I wrote it, because I want every parent and pediatrician and therapist to know what the latest research says about how we develop resilience, because as we know through the pandemic, our ability to be flexible as humans and not crack under pressure is one of the most important skills we can have. Right? Who knows what the future holds? So that's a long answer to your question.
Yeah, no, I love it, because really, even when you think about if you're being a conscious parent or a gentle parent or a peaceful parent, most of us are still swinging that pendulum of, I'm going to be conscious and mindful about my response, and then what the heck just happened? I just exploded at my kid. That doesn't fit my paradigm, right? And it doesn't feel good. And it's not feeling good to them. And so when you say this brain body parenting, how is it landing for my child? And also, how is it landing for me? Yes. That is real life.
That is real life. And we all know, like what you just said, sometimes we do or say things that we know isn't the best, but in the moment we can't prevent it.
Mhm.
It feels like we can't prevent it. Of course, we can
Right.
develop, but
Right.
now we know why. That's when the nervous system shifts to defense, and it happens for children, it happens for adults. And self-compassion, I think, is so important. And also understanding why it happens is the key to helping us not have it happen as maybe as often as it does for some of us.
Mhm. I really love that it really helps unpack the shame around our own reaction.
Yeah.
Because when we unpack that shame, we can do something different. We go, oh, this is because this happened. And then we can reflect, oh, so next time I feel my chest getting tight or my neck getting tight, I'm going to remember, oh, I've got to attend to my own nervous system reaction.
Yes,
What
I'm
are
having a reaction in my nervous system. And without blame or shame and with compassion, that's the hard part. I mean,
yes,
I'm thinking it's hard for me still. So let's just
yes,
say that we are I think the parenting stakes are so high that it's easy to feel like we're missing the mark or we're a bad parent. And this is a way for us to really understand, no, our nervous system protects us too.
mhm,
And many of us have these subconscious memories in our bodies of things that we may not even remember from our own childhood or from other traumas that we've been in
mhm.
that can make us shift really fast when our child does or says something. And it happens so fast, our brain doesn't know it, but our body does. And that's when those things happen. So it's really, oh, I hope it leads to so much more um, compassion for ourselves because parents and especially moms are very, very hard on ourselves. We judge ourselves very harshly.
Yes. And there's a long history of moms being blamed for every little thing, from
Oh,
research to society at large. And so, of course, there's this huge shadow cast over us about
yeah.
how perfect we need to be.
I love how you said that. There is research in the field of psychology. And I mean, even as little as 50 years ago when mothers were blamed for autism in their children, right? Like things that are so powerful. Or even if you think about the attachment paradigms, um, these tests that they use to measure attachment, I think that it's very easy for our culture to think, oh, well, it's the mother's fault.
Right.
And really, we know differently. It's not the mother's fault.
Mhm.
It's that mothers are humans
Yes.
and we have our own struggles and stresses,
Mhm.
and we are under cared for ourselves.
Yes.
Both mothers, especially in the last couple of years, are
Mhm.
carrying very, very heavy burdens,
Mhm.
heavier than we really are made to carry alone.
Yes. Yes. That community care piece is missing, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Ah, just gonna breathe for a minute and attend to my own nervous system.
Yes, isn't that wonderful? Just take a
Yeah.
moment,
Mhm.
feel the feet on the ground or your back in the chair. It's so much to take in when we stop for a moment and realize
Right.
there's a lot going on.
It's a lot. And we've been through so much over the 2 years. We tend to think, oh, the worst of it is over. But I think now we're thinking about how our bodies have carried this for so long. And now what do our brains and bodies need?
Absolutely. You are so right. The tail of it,
Mhm.
so we have the apex or of one apex, hopefully it was for this disease. And then the tail, though, is going to reveal the impacts of the toxic stress. And it's going to be, and I say toxic stress because it lasted so long. If it would
Yes.
have lasted 3 months, we would have been in a different situation. But since it lasted years, for each of us, we're going to have, I hope we can all pay attention to what those impacts were and start
Mhm.
to heal, start to feel more integrated. Because I think a lot of parents went into autopilot because we had to, right?
Yes.
What was the alternative?
Mhm. And that's where that piece comes in, where now we have to unpack any shame we may have around choices we made to survive and to get through. And for sure. Well, I wonder, what do you think is something in this newest book? I mean, we talked about that self-compassion piece, which is absolutely pivotal. I wonder if there's something else that would be helpful for listeners to hear about how this brain body approach can really help them get that bird's eye view that you were talking about.
Yeah, I think that bird's eye view can help us calm down actually in our bodies, because when we take the bird's eye view, the intensity of the moment sometimes can be dispersed, I've found. Like
Yeah.
if I'm working with a parent and, for example, another big idea in the book is that there's a difference between top down and bottom up or body up behaviors. And when a parent can look at their child who's, say, having a tantrum, which we know is a body up behavior, then all of a sudden it shifts from, oh my gosh, I've got to stop this behavior, or what, this child has to learn a lesson here, to, oh my goodness, this child is in a state of overwhelm. Their
Yeah.
body budget, that's another big idea there. We have body budgets. Their body budget is shot, and we really need to down regulate. We need to leave the market, or maybe take a nap, or just slow down. So I think one of the big ideas, in addition to having self-compassion, is that we can look at our children through a new lens. And the lens isn't, how do we fix the child with a particular script or something to say in the moment, but how do we view the child's brain and body and our own in this moment, which is reflected in their behaviors and in their emotional tone. The other thing I think is really important is that the research on co-regulation and something called emotional contagion, which basically means that emotions are kind of contagious. And again, I don't say this to scare parents, but there is research that shows that our emotions are kind of contagious, that our well-being matters and our state matters. So when our child is very upset or going through a difficult time, paying attention to ourselves first is actually, from a mental health standpoint, one of the healthiest things we can do.
Yeah.
So it allows us to say, okay, how am I in this moment? And do I need a few seconds or minutes to gather myself before I engage with my child? So there's some powerful shifts I think we can learn from, based on what we now know about how nervous systems communicate with each other. And that is, I think, one of the most important aspects of the book. And that is including the newest research on the impact of human nervous systems on each other.
I mean, I can't even tell you how many mothers have said to me, Amy, it feels so unfair because if I'm in a bad mood, the whole house is in a bad mood. Like, why do I have to carry the emotional bandwidth of the family? And I'm like, I know. And we talk about why this is why your needs have to come up and be a major part of the equation.
Yes. And we can just all collectively just hold hands with each other as mothers and think, wow, that's a big burden to carry. And we don't have to let it freak us out, but I have to agree. I mean, just a few days ago, I was speaking with one of my daughters, and she said something akin to, you were so relaxed tonight. It set the whole tone for the meal. It was Easter weekend. And she goes, it was wonderful because I just took in how relaxed you were. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Yes, I did have a good time, but then I'm also wondering on the other end, wow, we do matter. Like when we are relaxed as parents, it does matter to our children, and it's usually kind of cozy for them. It's a good thing. So without pressure on ourselves, I guess that is, like you said, it can allow us to not feel like self-care is optional or when I can get to it, but it's rather a part of being of parenting. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it really is just that. It's as pivotal as making all those decisions and getting all the things done. And, it's finding ways to fold it in, which also can feel hard, right? So,
Which also can feel hard. And depending on what level of perfectionism you have in you, I know that I certainly have ideas about how I like things done, and I always kind of been fairly precise in my work and as a mother, and just looking at some of the things. What are some of the things we can take off as essential on our own list? Like, this is what I'm looking at. What's essential and what's not? Is it essential that the dishes would get done, within an hour of eating, or maybe they can sit there for an hour while we play? I mean, that little things like that, or if that feels big to you. But I think coming down to, I love Greg McEwen's work on essentialism, like consciously thinking about what's most important to me. And I used to think that organization and, keeping the house tidy and keeping up with laundry and all those things were essential. And now I'm seeing that what perhaps got missed in that a lot for me was downtime with my kids.
yes, where you can just be present and undistracted.
And undistracted. Yeah. Yeah.
I've always found in the evenings to be helpful to find something that we all enjoy. So, when they're really little, you think, oh my gosh, do I have to play trains again?
Yeah.
Or, and
Yes. Yeah.
that can feel less self-care-y. But if you find something that everybody enjoys, a book everybody's listening to, or that can be so helpful.
So helpful. And there are games that can be ranges for all ages that are fun, and some of them even involve getting to know each other better. So yes, those activities are, if everyone enjoys them, it's just great. Yeah.
So the other thing I love that I'm going to mention is that you really talk about, like, we can stop managing their behavior because we're really taking on this new lens.
Yeah.
And that piece stands out to me so much because so often that's what's in our face, like, oh, but they're fighting, or they're breaking things, or they're running away, or they're screaming and crying. And
it can feel like a hamster wheel. It can feel like, the game whack-a-mole at a carnival. Like, I'm going to get rid of this behavior, and now, oh, one popped up over there. And it can feel like you're constantly on that whack-a-mole hamster wheel. I understand that, and it's so hard. But yes, I feel like this lens shift can actually take some of the pressure off of us, because the portal to helping conflict, let's just say sibling rivalry, for example, which is a common one, and which is expected. Of course, siblings figure out how to social problem solve on each other. So it's wonderful to have siblings. And yes, they will not always, quote unquote, get along. That's not developmentally expected. But if the tension in the house, and if it feels like it's really a challenge for the family, I think that is an important thing to take into consideration. And that's when we can visualize the behaviors as the tip of the iceberg, and then sink into, okay, I'm seeing a lot of, let's just say, red pathway behaviors, which is my code word for the fight or flight response. Let's just say there's a lot of hitting and kicking, and behaviors that seem to be more instinctual than purposeful.
Mhm.
Then we can begin to ask ourselves, for that particular child who's in those activated states, let's think about what's going on underneath the surface for that child, beyond that child's behaviors. And oftentimes we can find either a little developmental challenge, maybe a little developmental delay where they're just catching up to something to be able to social problem solve. Because sibling rivalry often is happening because those skills for social problem solving, the development isn't there yet.
Mhm.
And then I think that's how it just kind of helps us relax and think, okay, I don't have to come up with a new reinforcement schedule or sticker chart or take away all these things because heck, I've already taken away everything for this week. We can start to think deeper on a deeper level. And I think I explain how to do that in more detail in both of my books, but
Mhm.
that's kind of the idea to help us shift from managing behaviors to promoting pro-social behaviors through our relationships.
Yes, is such a it's so much easier on our nervous system because we're not always focused on I have to, fix this. Instead, this can just be a part of what's going on overall developmentally.
Absolutely. And realize that it's not our responsibility to necessarily fix. It's our responsibility, I think, to understand how we grow the child's capacities to fix things for themselves, which
Yes.
is another way of saying self-regulation. And
Yes.
when we build self-regulation, we find that we don't build it through teaching a child how to be better, like don't do that to your brother or don't do that to your sister. And we go from that to, okay, what are the building blocks that this child needs? So if you have a child with out of control self-regulation who can't control their emotions and their bodies and their behaviors, that child is going to need some work in the building blocks, and we go there. So it takes kind of some of the pressure off of us to be behavior managers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Mm.
So I wonder then if we might shift just a little bit to talk about how some punishments that we use can actually take a toll on the brain and body of children and caregivers, adults in their lives. It's as you know, spanking and corporal punishment are legal in all homes in the United States and legal in public schools in 18 states and private schools in every single state except for one, which is still going on here in the United States, even though it's illegal in most other countries around the world.
Mm. Powerful statistics.
Mhm.
So let's just think about that together for a moment, because we do know what causes stress and trauma on human beings.
Mhm.
So when we think about our the main driving factor in being human is survival.
Mhm.
And we are built to create states of safety, not consciously, but again, through our reactions in our body, through our phylogenetic history, through the evolution of humans, to be to detect threat and to stay safe.
Mhm.
So the neuroscience of safety is very well entrenched in things like the polyvagal theory and the theory of constructed emotions, the neuroscience around how humans feel safe. So now let's look at some of our techniques that are there, that are in place. And I was speaking to a live Facebook audience yesterday about seclusion and restraint. So
Yes.
we can include some of these things in the idea of spanking as well,
Mhm.
that fits into a technique that makes a human being, a child or an adult, feel unsafe.
Mhm.
So corporal punishment or physical punishment from an adult who is supposed to be your caregiver, or, especially from an adult that's safe, but from any adult, sends our bodies and our brains into a state of defense. So that means it would send us into a fight or flight response or a shutdown response, depending on how the nervous system is taking it. The
Mhm.
fight or flight would be to try to run away, to fight back. And the shutdown would be when there's not enough energy in the system, so the person kind of starts to disconnect.
Mhm.
Both of those are stress responses. And here's I think the most important thing to understand about spanking. When we are attempting to teach a child a lesson because they've done something wrong, usually that done something wrong piece has to do with a child who is in a state of defense already. Let's say they threw stuff off the table, or they crumpled up their siblings' homework, or they spit on somebody. Those are generally not purposeful behaviors, but defensive misbehaviors, meaning their body is leading the way.
Mhm.
When you want to help an individual learn a lesson about a behavior they did that wasn't pro-social,
Mhm.
what we need to do is add safety rather than take it away. So we would add safety. You could absolutely set a limit and let the person know, the child, the student know, that's not acceptable behavior within the values of this system or our family. But then you understand that the reason that behavior happened was that that nervous system was in a state of defense. So
Mhm.
we add security and safety to that.
Mhm.
When you spank a child who is in a state of defense, you deepen their sense of threat.
Mhm.
So it's basically the opposite of teaching a child a lesson.
Mhm.
And it teaches them to be afraid. So again, with due respect to every parent who makes the choices and decisions they make based on what they believe is best for their child, the neuroscience is clear, and the science on resilience is clear, that seclusion, restraint, physical corporal punishment do not build resilience, they degrade it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard, when we think about when I'm having a conversation with my own teenager, I can feel in my nervous system when it's going well, and I can feel in my nervous system when it's not. And I think the same is true when you're using um, seclusion and restraints and spanking, that you can feel in your own nervous system when this is creating connection or
Yes.
disconnection. And it
Yes.
impacts us all because we're all connected.
Yes, yes. There is something to that word intuition. You feel it. You feel when the connection is leaving, and you feel when it's stronger. And
Mhm.
both are okay. I mean, we
Right.
both are reasonable, because we are meant to go through struggles and challenges. But
Mhm.
that awareness is so key.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to mention along these lines is that if you choose not to use spanking, for example, or or seclusion as
Mhm.
a technique to help your child learn a lesson, it doesn't mean that you are coddling them.
Mhm.
There are certainly, we know that being a sturdy parent is important. We
Mhm.
want our children to feel safe. We want them to know that we're in charge, not that they're in charge. I've
Right.
seen many children whose parents are hesitant to disappoint them. And so that often turns out into some anxiety, especially in toddlers,
Right.
because
Yes.
toddlers need to know we're in charge. So I just want parents to know that we can absolutely be sturdy parents without using techniques that are meant to intimidate. It's possible to do both.
Yeah.
Sturdy, strong parent and not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have, I don't know, 30 plus videos on alternatives to spanking through the No Spank Challenge and all over YouTube through some amazing professionals who want to help families feel connected and know what to do instead.
Beautiful.
So, well, I just want to thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom and for spending so much time writing these books. I have your professional books for therapists and your books for parents. I'm always recommending them because they're just fully aligned with what I am doing with my own clients and in my own family. So
Thank
to
you
the
so
best of my
much.
ability. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all you do and for shedding light on some of these super important issues. I'm really grateful for that.
yes, well, thank you so much.
Take care.
You too.